This is the Prophecy Project. Understanding the times, the nations in military conflicts, with Bible teacher and author Alan Bonk.
Welcome to session number 11 of the Prophecy Project. Last session, I covered the connections of America to the biblical descriptions found in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the book of Revelations, pertaining to the last days or end-time Babylon. Also, that no other nation comes close to fulfilling those scriptures. Now, we move from Babylon onto my second book called Asshur the Assyrian. This book is not a large book, but it is hugely significant in my opinion. It will allow the astute student of prophecy to identify the man who will become the beast or Antichrist before his plans, motives, and wickedness are manifest, provided, of course, that the Lord has not removed his bride first. He will at first appear to be a successful, effective leader, a man who we can trust, can be trusted. He is called the Antichrist only once in Scripture, but is revealed in Scripture a multitude of times under the title, the name, the Assyrian. I first became aware of this truth back in 1974 when reading a small booklet by Dr. Robert Hooley titled Antichrist. I began watching for this Assyrian to come on the scene. This was not easy because at the time, back then, there was very little information available in the news sources from that area of the world. You just couldn't find it. With time and additional study, I began to fill out my scriptural understanding of the Assyrian, his life, and accomplishments. In 2009, I decided to write my findings, and they were put in a book. This book is like an arrow. It's very narrowly focused on him and not on prophecy in general. The prophetic events around him are only referenced when they are associated with him, the Assyrian nation. Many people, especially in America, don't know who the Assyrians are. They often just assume that we're talking about Syrians. But while they are neighbors geographically, nation next to nation, they are not the same ethnic people. The Assyrian people go back to Asshur, the son of Shem, who was the son of Noah. Asshur and his descendants settled and lived in the northern part of Mesopotamia, northern Iraq today. This is found in Genesis 10, 11, and 12. 11. Out of the land of Shinar went forth Asshur, and he builded Nineveh and the city Rehoboth and Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, the same as a great city. So that's where they came from. Asshur was one of 5 brothers who are the fathers of the nations, the ethnic families of the Middle East. This is seen in Genesis chapter 10, verse 22. The children of Shem, Elam, Asshur, Arphaxad, Lud, Aram. Elam settled in the area, became known as Persia or Iran today. Arphaxad is the lineage of Abraham that the children of Israel came down through. Aram means Syria, and they settled in west of Shinar in Canaan. Lud settled in northern Africa and is also known as Lydia. By and large, the descendants of Elam, Aram, and Lud have come under the control of Islam. Those nations are Islamic now. Iran, Syria, Egypt, and Libya. And they have, Arphaxad are the Jews of today, and they have chosen Judaism. Asshur, the nation of the Assyrians, are mostly Christian, 90% plus by most estimates. According to the Assyrian tradition, they had a national day or a national time of conversion in the 1st century A.D. They became Christians, following their king Abgar. Now, aside from Islam's internal conflicts of Shiites and Sunnis, etc., the Middle East conflicts are mostly against the Jews and against the Assyrians, Judaism and Christianity. And it's becoming clearer today that there is little room in an Islamic Middle East for Jews and Christians, at least not as equals with full rights. Both Assyrians and the Jews in the Middle East have suffered at the hands of Islam. Now, nothing is as simple as I have just stated, but you can get so complicated and complex in your analysis that you lose the root of the problem and thus your perspective. The history of the Assyrians is extensive. The early kings of Assyria were called kings who lived in tents. They reigned from approximately 3000 BC to 2400 BC, long time ago. When Sargon I came in 2400 BC, Assyria became an empire for the first time. Not just a nation, but an empire. Assyria was totally independent at times and under the control of others at other times, such as the Babylonians, the Akkadians, and the Sumerians. The late period, what they call the late period of the Assyrian Empire, was from 911 BC to 612 BC and ended with the sacking of Nineveh by the Medes. This is considered by many to be the end of the Assyrian Empire. Ceased to be an empire at that point in time. But the nation and her people continued as a nation in the land of their fathers. They didn't leave. They had maintained their national institutions up to the 20th century, modern day. The end of World War I, when Britain and the Allies came in, they carved Assyria into 4 pieces. And they gave the land of Assyria to Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Thus, they effectively ended Assyria as a modern nation. The Assyrian Genocide, which took place during World War I, by the Turks and the Kurds of that area at that time, nearly ended the nation as a people, as an ethnic people. While estimates vary, nearly 75% of the Assyrians in the Middle East were killed. Turkey, the Ottoman Empire at that time, also lost its empire at the same point in time. The Bible teaches that Assyria and the Assyrian people will be a nation again in the end times, in the end days, at the end of time. In fact, during the millennium, which is beyond the end of the world that we talk about, but into a time when Messiah will reign, the 1,000-year reign of Messiah. Isaiah 19:23 through 25. In that day there shall be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. That's about 500 miles. And the Assyrian shall come to Egypt, and the Egyptians into Assyria. And the Egyptians shall serve God, with the Assyrians. Verse 24. In that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and Assyria, even a blessing in the midst, or in the middle of it all, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance. What a tremendous scripture. It's obvious that this situation has never existed in history and is yet to happen. Assyria of this coming time will be the work of God's hands. God will put the Middle East right. It's the only way it's going to happen. Islam will no longer come between the nations to destroy God's people. Egypt will be healed and Assyria restored, with Israel at the center of it all, God's inheritance. There is today a movement by the Assyrian survivors of the genocide to reestablish an autonomous state in northern Iraq, the area of Assyria, for the Assyrian people today. They have formed many associations worldwide to promote this new Assyrian state. There are estimates that there are as many as 3 million ethnic Assyrians now in the world, maybe more. There is a desire in the Assyrian heart to go home, God-given. They keep their traditions and their languages alive. They have a new flag, a new national anthem. They even have a television network for Assyrians called Ishtar TV. It is my opinion that the modern Assyrians are an intelligent, industrious people. Given half a chance, they will succeed with their endeavors. I don't believe that the Muslims of the area in the Middle East there will ever accept the Assyrian or Christian state back in what they consider to be a Muslim land. There will have to be some major changes in the Middle East before this happens. There will be changes. We will cover some of these changes in coming sessions. The second reference, now moving on to Asshur in Scripture, is found in Numbers chapter 24, 22, and 24. There's not only a reference to Asshur, but it is prophetic to the Jewish people, to the Jewish Messiah, and to the end times. When the Israelites were coming out of Egypt, historically, in Scripture, they began to move into the land of the Moabites, which is modern Jordan. The Moabites had seen what the children of Israel had done to the Amorites on their way there and were anxious to find a way to stop Israel from entering the land. The king of Moab, Balak, decided to attempt to stop them spiritually by having a powerful prophet come and curse them. And he chose a man named Balaam. And through a series of events, you read them in Scripture, Balaam came to the mountain, or a mountain location overlooking the camp of Israel. But each time he attempted to curse Israel for Balak, a blessing came out instead. God interceded and said, I see no iniquity in Jacob, and he would not allow Balaam to curse Israel. But Balaam had a vision at the end and a word from God concerning the events of the end times, concerning Israel, Moab, and the area of Canaan, which is the general area. It is as follows, 24:14. And now, behold, I, Balaam, go to my people. Come, therefore, and I will advertise or advise thee what this people Israel shall do to thy people Moab in the latter days, the hindermost of time, in times. And he took up his parable, and he said, Balaam, the son of Beor, hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said, he hath said, which heard the words of God and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, having his eyes opened, shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. This prophecy is for down the road. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter. Now that word star there is big S. That's a name. He's called the Star of Jacob. And a scepter with a big S. It's a name again. It means a king. Shall rise out of Israel. Shall smite the corners of Moab. and destroy the children of Sheth. And Edom shall be a possession, and Seir shall be a possession for Israel. For his enemies and Israel shall do valiantly. They will fight well. Out of Jacob shall come he that shall have dominion, and shall destroy him that remaineth in the city. This is Messiah the King being talked about. It's a messianic prophecy. The city, I believe, is Jerusalem. Verse 20, and when he, Balaam, looked on Amalek, who was another king there at the time, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. Verse 21, and he, Balaam, looked at the Kenites, or the Canaanites, and took up his parable and said, strong is thy dwelling place, and thou puttest thy nest in a rock. Verse 22, nevertheless, the Kenites shall be wasted until Asshur shall come and carry thee away captive. Now that word carry thee away means take thee captive. Verse 23, and he took up his parable and said, alas, who shall live when God doeth this? That word live there is who's going to survive when God is doing these works. Who's going to make it through? We've heard that time before. Except these days be shortened, no flesh would survive. And the ships shall come from the coasts of Kittim, and shall afflict Asshur, and shall afflict Eber, and Eber, or he, shall perish forever. And Balaam rose up and went and returned to his place, and Balak went his way. So, Balaam has a vision to be fulfilled in the last days. He tells King Balak what Israel is going to do to Moab, his people, Jordan, in the last days. Balaam begins to speak about a man that will come out of Israel. He's not contemporary to Balaam, because he will come at the end, not now and not nigh. This man is called the star or the scepter, the king of Israel. He will be the king of Israel, Messiah. Israel, with his help, shall smite a part of Moab, Jordan, and all of Edom, which is southern Jordan. They shall be a possession of Israel. And it says that Israel shall fight valiantly with strength and skill. Israel will be a military nation. The scepter will ultimately have dominion over the whole area and all that there is there, and will take back the city of Jerusalem. There is a nation called Asshur, an Assyrian army with an Assyrian general or king at that time, which will come into Canaan and capture and take captive them. Asshur will be stopped. And that word, when it talks about it, afflicted, means to be humbled. He is put down. And the kings of the ships which come from Kittim do this to him. We will see these events that we just read echoed in Daniel later on in another session. And we'll have more data to clarify this account and really know exactly what it means. Now, I need to close this session, and I want to do it with a brief summary of what we just read. Israel will be a nation, verse item 1, at the end of the age. Not just a nation, but a valiant military one. Item 2, Israel will do battle with her neighbors, the nations around, and win. Item 3, the Jewish Messiah will set up his kingdom and his dominion at the end of the age. Item 4, a nation called Asshur, Assyria, will exist at that time, at the time of the end. That Assyria's army and leadership will move into the area of Canaan, or the Middle East, and near Israel and Jordan. Item 5, Asshur will be stopped or humbled by the ships of Kittim And these are the people who come from the isles of the Gentiles. Okay, I need to stop. I need to close this session at this point. But the next session, I want to move into the book of Micah, which speaks about Asshur, the Assyrian, and the Messiah again. You'll find it interesting. Thank you.
This was only one session of many. Be sure to continue watching the Prophecy Project series. If you would like to read more information on this subject, you can find Alan's books on Amazon.com.